All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we've got New Spring, and we're going to try to cover through chapter 9 today and way overanalyze Siuan and Moiraine today as we go through.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll try and keep my thoughts focused just on that because once I got started, I couldn't stop, and I've already finished it, and it made me nostalgic, and I almost reached up and grabbed Eye of the World and started over
Well,
after I finished
and
it.
I'll try not to derail us too much because I've got a whole page of notes just in the first 8 pages. So, and let's see.
Well, then I think I'll riff off of you and let's just go. There's not so one of the things that kind of jumped out at me, um, especially at these first 8 chapters. So you get kind of that prologue, that opening chapter with Lan, and even though nothing actually happens, it is kind of action oriented because you have a military scene. They're headed off to battle. It looks like there's going to be a battle, and then he kind of fakes you out because there's not. But there's a tension there. There's action there. There's not a lot happening in these first 8 chapters, but that's not to say it's boring. That's not to say it's filler or uninteresting. There's a lot of world building, a lot of character, meat here. Uh, Even though there's not much in the way of action happening. I mean, for crying out loud, other than that scene with Lan, and we've already talked about the second chapter where Itara Morosa dies and has the foretelling, it's just the girls going about school and then writing down names. There's not much happening, and yet it's incredibly engrossing.
Well, I would push back in a little bit. They're kind of going about school, but because of what happened in the second chapter, it's not school as usual. I mean,
Exactly.
It's almost like someone who wrote Harry Potter might have followed a formula here.
Yep.
But it's also, oh man, what did I see it? I saw a nice little write up of how Harry Potter is just Star Wars, and it basically went chronologically through, and it was
Beat by
event by
beat.
event
Yeah.
by event by event, and I was disappointed. But
Well,
but no, we needed this. It's almost like, as we always say, there's a lot of setup going on here for payoff later.
and this is so you've just hit me. You've sent me into rant territory, and I don't know if this is going to go into your notes or not. But here was kind of my big takeaway from these opening chapters. First of all, I quasi mea culpa. Like we said before we got into this, it has been a long while since either one of us has read this one.
And I had only read it once.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago.
And I read the book once, and I read the graphic novel once. So I remembered the major beats, but something
I had the graphic novels, not just to read, but to have as just because it's a collection now,
And we made fun of the big white book art and the cover art. The graphic novel art is great. I don't remember who was the artist that did those, but the graphic novel art is great. It is pretty clearly someone who, even if he wasn't a fan, had taken the time to look at the source material. Imagine that. But something I will give the show is that I had forgotten how explicit Moiraine and Siuan's relationship was in this book. And not explicit in the cringy way the show did it, but just that,
no, in fact, she
they,
even mentions in her head that she might set Siuan up with a family member if they were in a different position.
mm-hmm.
If they were just friends, not eyes to eye, she would have set her up with whatever such and such cousin or brother or whatever.
Yep. But it's pretty well known that they comfort each other at night. That, I mean, I don't remember where it is. Somebody walks in on them. I think it's I don't remember if it's Sheriam or Myrelle walks in on them practicing and says something about, why don't y'all just move in together or something to that effect. And
well, there is something to be said, and the show could have riffed on this about college girl experimentation, because they do get in these close quarters, and women are more likely to be bisexual than men. And they're also more likely to be experimental in youth than men.
And that comes out, not to get ahead of ourselves, but that comes out later in the book, where Siuan, of all people, is using her womanly wiles to seduce somebody, to seduce a guy to get information. So to the we ranted about that a lot, in large part because the scene was so cringy. It wasn't just the why are you doing this relationship, but here's the problem where I take all of that credit back is that the reason this book works so well is because Moiraine and Siuan are well established in your head by the time you get to this book. By the time this book came out, uh, before Path of Daggers, Moraine's been gone for 2 books. You've had Siuan's rise and fall and her new station solidified with Egwene. And so you know who these women are. And so what makes it so interesting, I think I mentioned this when we talked about The Witcher, is that so the animated movie that came out on Netflix, I can't remember the name of it, something of the wolf. Who's the old guy, the trainer? I mean, you've played the game, so I think he's in the game. You know, the old guy in
Don't ask
season
me Chuck
2.
questions. I've only got
Yeah,
so
I
much
know. That's a
so much
Chuck
room in
question.
my brain, and
So
we've been getting a lot of material for this stuff.
the old guy in season 2, he's great. He's grizzled. He's seen some stuff, and he's kind of hardened by the world. And going back and watching the animated movie was kind of his origin story, and he wasn't that, and it's kind of shocking at first to watch it out of chronological order because you see this is who he used to be and this is how he became who he is now. It works better dramatically because he used to be this, kind of snarky, happy-go-lucky, in it for the money, in it for the adventure guy, and then he had to become the head witcher, the guy, and it was now his responsibility to put back together what was left.
Well, it's an archetype. He was the young man that became a father.
Yes, yes. And that is what you lose by having that horribly cringe lesbo scene in the series, because that's not who they are anymore.
But they also lost something that could have been a great driver of suspense. At that point in the books, Siuan and Moiraine are at odds.
Yes.
And they're very much putting on that show. And you just let us behind the curtain. We didn't need to be behind the curtain. We could have been in suspense that they had something going on between them that was maybe even a past love affair that went wrong.
And that was so that enhances what I was thinking, which was, if you wanted to do that, why didn't you make a flashback? And to your point, a flashback would have been more impactful because they are at odds. They are butting heads publicly, and this is the relationship they used to have. It makes it more impactful. And specifically and I texted you this, that as I was going through it, it hadn't really dawned on me, but in that second chapter, especially, but then you see it a little more as it goes on from Moraine's points of view, I had forgotten she had a temper. And the more I read, the more I went, there's some interesting parallels here between Moiraine and Nynaeve, which would be a lot of the animosity, because that tends to happen if you see too much of yourself in somebody that you're already kind of opposed to. It's going to create an animus. But that's not who Moiraine is now, to the point of that's not who Siuan and Moiraine are now.
I think I texted back that you see that in the mature Moiraine as well, and I gave you some examples.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll go into that. Let's get into chronology here,
yes.
So
okay.
we can get through the chapters. But they starts out, obviously they just saw the keeper die and got sent on their merry way and act like nothing happened. And so as they're walking to their rooms, we get a nice little description of the tower. A lot of these chapters, not only is it setting up for later in the book, but I think he had just written the big white book. He's giving us a cliff notes of the entire world, of the things that we kind of get bits and pieces, and we can kind of piece together in our heads up in the 6 books going up to this. But now he's kind of condensing it down, so just in case you didn't get it. And I have a feeling he wanted to write this book because of fan questions too. and fan comments, because this is about the time of the internet when the online forums were really going, and he really did want to answer questions, and then he wanted us to stew on some of the other things. And I think the things he wanted to answer, the basic things, what do people look like from this country? What are the politics behind here? What does it look like inside of the tower? Let's give you a nice description of the tower, which is what he did here. And which brings me to my first note, page 40, the very top of the page. And this is where I'll try not to derail us here. She was looking at the colors on the floor, and she talks about irrelevant thoughts drifted through her head, and they're not irrelevant. Why equal when some Ajas are larger than others? Had they once been the same size? How could that have been achieved? A newly raised Aes Sedai chose her Aja freely, yet each Aja had quarters of the same size. Irrelevant thoughts were better than blah blah blah. Why equal? This is a place made by women for women. And what do women do when they come together in coalition? They strive for equity. That's part of the reason we have the problems we have today, because we got this influx of an ideal that is designed by women. Women want to be equal, but under the table be less equal. Subversively find a way to be more equal than you. So when you're talking about the outside in, we're going to make quarters for all of them. Well, there's only 50 in this one, and there's 150 in that one, and that pattern will probably stay the same, but still everybody got equal cut. Everybody got an equal piece of the pie. If you don't use all the pie, that's on you.
And we'll talk a lot about the flip side of that next time, after they get raised to full Aes Sedai and start to see what things are really like.
And here's the other part of that. The more egalitarian you make something, the more separated they get, just like we see in the Scandinavian countries. It's most egalitarian place in the world. Yet you get the biggest divide between men as engineers and women as nurses. The more egalitarian you make it, the more that split of who goes to blue, who goes to green, who goes to yellow, who goes to white is going to have, because people are going to actually go to what interests them. And oh my gosh, people have patterns, and there are trends, and there are bell curves that are thicker in one way than the other. Like the whites is probably one of the smallest ones, because women tend to be less logically, keep being careful with my words here, we'll just say mathematically oriented, in that set logical pattern.
They tend to be less focused. So I've brought this up before, and I really need to dig it out and find it to show it. But there was a study a while back that followed boys and girls elementary age who were the gifted and talented, or whatever you call it in your area, the very high scoring math and science kids. And they followed them through college. And while they had all, boys and girls, tested in the top whatever percentile in math and science, something like 90% of the boys ended up going into STEM fields. And I don't remember the number of girls, but it was significantly less. I think it was less than half. Well, why? Well, because when you look at the data, that was all the boys tested high in. The girls tested high in other stuff too. They had other options.
Yeah, and it's overlapping bell curves. I'm on the female end of interest when it comes to bell curve. I could not be an engineer. I have engineering clients, and we talk about it all the time. I'm mathematically inclined enough to be an engineer, but that amount of precision to me is the epitome of boring. Sometimes I wish it in my job, because there's so much, well, let's see if this works in our job. But at the same time, that's what keeps it interesting. Whereas this engineer talks about these turbines, this thing that's bigger than my house, but a grain in there, a thousandth the width of a hair will throw the whole thing off. That's how precise these machines are. And that to me would be just a nightmare of complete and absolute boredom for the rest of my life.
Yep. All right, moving on. What's your next note?
Page 44. Okay, so they make it through. What do they do? They get to their rooms. Did they go together at this point? Yeah, because they go to practice. Yeah. So they're going to go practice for the test. And that's important for these next several chapters, because it's all about that test in the end.
Yes.
44. Okay, this is where I had this thought before you sent me that thing about Nynaeve. because it is almost the second to last paragraph. Moiraine nodded. The tower taught its students to live with what they could not change too, but some things were important enough to try, even if you were sure to fail. That had to be one of her lessons as a child. And this is where she's got that adventurer spirit. I'm going to sail across the ocean, even if there might not be something on the other end. You know, I'm going to fight back against this tyrannical government, even though I know I'm going to die because I have a pitchfork and they have, you know, F-16 airplanes, right? This sets up her attitude going forward. And you said it was a temper, but I think she just has that expansive, always never give up is what I'll call it. The never give up attitude. She's that frog in that picture where the bird is eating the frog, but the frog's holding the bird's neck. That's
and Jordan's doing a great job. That it's so, again, the reason it's so engrossing is because we know who she becomes, but she's not there yet. But he's showing, not telling us how she got there.
The next one's kind of like a pithy physiology nerd thing. On page 45, she talks about the tingle of familiar women channeling and how that never goes away with her and Siuan. And he might have been making a little dirty joke there or something, but my first thought was, from a physiological standpoint, is this the Aes Sedai version of syncing your menses? Everybody in the room together, everybody's hormone profiles start matching up, and
could be.
Okay, so they practice and da-da-da-da. Oh, the next one I thought was interesting. Anything story-wise for the next couple pages? Because my next note's on page 48.
Not really. No, it's just
okay. This whole chapter is basically them practicing. We meet Myrelle here in a little bit and get to know some other characters, but I thought it was interesting on page 48. I'm trying to find where it was. It's where she's talking about gestures helping create the weaves. And it was interesting since we get an insight from the Aiel that you don't need the gestures. But she talks about how the gestures were actually connecting to something in your mind that were making the weaves possible. And I wonder if that was something where, again, two different ways of doing things could have come together and you could have come up with a better way, because it does make sense. I'm talking using my hands right now because it's syncing with my mind. That the Aes Sedai might be able to do things the Aiel can't because they incorporate the gestures. And the Aiel might be able to take that limitation because everything you do doesn't have to have the gestures. So I can talk without my hands moving, but it sure does help if I do it.
And some people are more animated when they talk than others.
Well, yeah, and I have a client that I don't think he can talk if his hands aren't gesturing what he's doing, because he has to stop what he's doing to tell his story. And I'm like, no, get to work, dude. We're working out. But I want him to be comfortable and be able to tell a story. It's like, after you're set, tell me your story. But it's like he has a stutter and a tick. He can't talk unless he's using his hands. Of course, he is Italian, but it's maybe it's genetic. I don't know. But that was an interesting thing for me, because we get that perspective in the other books that the Aiel or the Aes Sedai are amazed that they're channeling without moving their hands. But again, that might be one of the divides. Jordan could have had an opportunity there to make the Aiel a little bit badass later in the books, because they become more and more pathetic, because they can do something that others can't because they didn't have this tool. And then you could have had a merging of thoughts, because remember, the theme of the later books is people coming together and creating something better. Realistically, even the Shanshan merging with the Western, or the, I guess, Eastern to the Shanshan, but what we would call the Western lands in this world, to create something bigger and exchange ideas. So that could have been a little thing there, but it just jumped out at me when I read over it.
Something I just thought of that I haven't really thought of before is, think back to the fight between Nynaeve and Moiraine and Tenchiko. And Nynaeve actually thinks how if anyone walked in on them, they would just see two women standing still glaring at each other. So that makes me think that because Nynaeve is a wilder, she doesn't use as many hand gestures as the others do.
Yeah, except she needs to, when she's healing, she needs her herbs, and she needs to be doing the things with her hands that she
Yeah,
would
and
do
it
as
takes
a
her a
wisdom.
while to get to where she doesn't need her herbs to channel the healing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. Okay, Myrelle comes in, talks about making Moiraine squeal like a piglet. That was fun.
Giggity.
And of course, we all know who Myrelle is. She's the one who currently holds Lan's bond in
Mm-hmm.
our chronological book read. Does it give a good description of her?
I don't think it does here, but we do get one. Um, we do get one of her when we
Olive
meet her at
skin,
Celadon.
beautiful, and almost as tall as Swan.
Okay.
Yeah, the description is more about her personality than it is about her. But okay, so Myrelle helps, and eventually, by my notes, we get to where they all come together. Oh, because they're summoned to that meeting, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. The Amyrlin's going to tell them about the bounty.
Mm-hmm. So chronologically, Tamra comes in and does what I mean, I hope it wasn't put in the comments, because I set up last time. You'd think they'd be looking for him, but this is the Aes Sedai shooting themselves in the foot. Well, I forgot that they actually did. So again, read this once 20 years ago. But they go
Mm-hmm.
looking for him. Not the most efficient way, I think, but
Yep.
they're very expensive way, that's for sure. But one thing that jumped
Well,
out at me is on page 56, describing she describes a lot of the Aes Sedai we meet here, or the accepted, I should say.
that we will meet again later. Quite a few of them we will meet again later.
Well, in her description of the Sea Folk one, Zamel.
Oh, come on, man.
What?
I just saw your thumbnail for the Cowboys Super Bowl pictures.
It was either that or the VHS tape, which was the Cowboy
Yeah,
Super Bowl tape.
I forgot to yell at you about the stupid the last Wheel of Time reread when we started New Spring and your stupid thumbnail on that one. That was unnecessary.
Which one did I put for that?
My nipples.
Oh, sorry. Uh, let's see. Okay, so it's describing the Sea Folk,
Mm-hmm.
and it throws these little nuggets in there, but talks about she fumbled every weave time after time only to set it perfectly. And I'm like, that's because she's failing on purpose to hide the fact that she's already trained.
Yep. Which we have already found out, which is just extra confirmation of things to what you said, that we've already been given these nuggets here and there, and now he's saying it more directly, but still within that point of view, because Moiraine doesn't know what's going on here and probably won't for a very long time if she ever does.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, because basically they have representation from every known land that there wasn't, at least in recorded in the books, attempts for the Aes Sedai to contact the Aiel, because they're all surprised that there's wise ones. It's like, why are you surprised that there are women that can channel in this whole group of people that you ignored?
Well, especially are we told what they do in the Sea Folk? I think we are. I think they're abandoned on a deserted island. I think it says somewhere. But the Aiel, they don't go around culling their men, so they're going to have a stronger genetic uh, strain through their population, because their men will grow, because men manifest later, they will grow old enough to possibly have children,
Mm-hmm.
at least a few, before they manifest their ability to channel, and then they go off to the Blight to kill the Dark One.
Yeah, some would. The ones that manifested around 18, probably not, just looking at that culture
Hmm.
because of the way they do their courtship. Uh,
Mhm.
but the ones that she talks about later that some men don't manifest till in their 30s, those men could slip through the cracks and birth children, you know.
Yep.
Uh, then a little bit later, she's still talking about these people from, she's actually telling us that from all of these different cultures, they get people from, even though it's exceptionally rare in some. And she's talking about the Tinkers, and a little nugget for us all in here. Semi spoiler alert. So come back in 15 seconds if you haven't read all the books. But Varen, a stout brown who was even shorter than Moiraine, said that Tinker girls never tried to find their way to channeling on their own, that they did not want to channel or to become Aes Sedai. It must be so, since Varen had said it.
Oh.
Okay, you can come back now. Jazz hands. All right. Yeah. For Moiraine at this point, ignorance is bliss. uh, okay, this is a kind of a random note, and it could go anywhere in here. So where do you want to take us from here? So,
Let's just keep going down your notes.
well, this is more of a meta note. It's not on the page. I don't
Okay.
have another page number to like 122, but this is where I started reading to it audiobook wise, so
Mm.
I didn't get to write down as much. I had to multitask. We had one day without raining here, so I had to mow.
Um,
Oh, I guess it does fit here because I talked about the equality, and it's just a kind of a nugget to kind of think about as we go forward with thinking of Aes Sedai. And I think it's no surprise that you, I, and Scott are very annoyed by them because we're all men,
mhm,
and we don't think, well, we're capable of thinking like women if you learn about it, but it's still annoying. It still frustrates us because
mhm,
you want to, no, we want to just solve problems. We want to do this. You're shooting yourself in the foot. Women are the best at self-sabotage. Uh, they have low-fat diets, but yet nervous system issues later in life. Things like that. They're the best at self-sabotage. But is it a coincidence that Jordan put in that the determining factor in what is a hierarchy with this female organization is something nobody can see except the women themselves?
mhm.
That's why Morana is so surprised that Rand figured out that she was the head of the emissary, because the thing that determines their hierarchy is something he can't see.
Yeah, so far as we know, he can feel when a woman is holding the source,
But not the strength.
not the strength of it like he can a man.
And he
Yeah.
he forbid them from holding the source around him
Hmm.
at that time. But yeah, that was just a meta thought under the surface. It just doesn't surprise me, and he may not have consciously known the psychology behind it, but him and Harriet together put together this thing that inherently is very feminine.
Yep. Um, I do like the interplay. So going forward until your next note, just the next couple of chapters is them going to the stables, heading out to start collecting the names. One of the things I really like about the first uh chunk of the book here, um, before Moiraine leaves the tower, is her and Siuan always being together. You get a great contrast of why they work so well together as blues on this mission, because they really complement each other in their worldly knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
where Moiraine knows how to deal with aristocratic hierarchy, how to deal simple things like knowing what a good horse is and being able to ride. And but Siuan can see, the undercurrents. She can see because and I think partly perhaps because she's not seeing what's going on at the upper level. So her focus is more on, the lower class and what's going on there. Um, so and you get he says several times through here about how she's so good at solving puzzles.
Hmm.
That's the way her mind works. Her mind is very good at solving a puzzle, at seeing connections for things and how things work.
Well, and you also get like interaction with the women later. Swan has a very motherly interaction, whereas Moiraine is like a benevolent ruler.
Hmm. Yes, but yeah, they still so chapter 5. I like the title, "The Human Heart," because
Mm-hmm.
they're both, that they're both still young, so they're both still more emotional, and they're both human and good people. So this is a um impactful, emotional, you know, uh uh task for them to see, see the faces, see the actual people that are being impacted here, hear some of these sad stories, and both of them wanting to make sure that, okay, we're gonna fudge things here because this person needs the money.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna bend the rules here. Um, all right. So what was your next note?
Well, somewhere in here, and this is when I was listening, so I didn't write it down. Moiraine talks about thoughts on being a mother, and it's like, nah, I would never do that. I think it's in the same part where she talks about, well, if we were anything else other than what we are, I would set Swan up with
Mhm.
one of my family members. Definitely not these horrible ones, but this one's good, you know. But she makes a comment somewhere in there in her head that she would never do that. She would never go that route. And it was it's very indicative of the fact that when women can take care of themselves, they actually are less likely to want to settle down and do things like that. And the epitome of settling down is having children.
Mhm.
It's not getting married, it's having children. And we see this in modern culture. Why do women want to wait so long until they end up getting to a point where they regret it? Is because they would have to give up their freedom to some degree. Because,
Mhm.
yes, having children takes away a lot of your freedom.
Any
Uh,
human life literally depends on you for survival.
yeah. The statistics show if a man wins the lottery, he is more likely to get married. And if a woman wins the lottery, she is more likely to get divorced. Without that carrot, which is where the whole thing about the patriarchy comes in, without that carrot of you're taking care of me, left to their own, women typically actually don't want to have children. That's why they're so flooded with oxytocin when they have one and they hold it, because it's the nature's incentive to say, oh, you've got this responsibility now, you might as well love it, you
Hmm.
know. But pre that, they actually are averse to it because of the cost of reproduction. So women will turn down sex to avoid pregnancy. You know, it's the it they're hardwired for the after the fact love, and then they're all in because oxytocin is a wonderful drug. But yeah, when you talk about someone like Moiraine, she don't need no man. That trope
Yeah,
is that trope is actually biologically based. If I don't need no man, I ain't gonna go get no man.
and we'll get a lot more of that later as
Mm-hmm.
we go through the book, and we get a little more about their uh romantic backgrounds, shall
Mm-hmm.
we say. You see a little bit of it here, that even though she still has some of these thoughts, even though she's still, you know, she is experienced, at least with Siuan, she's not very romantically or sexually experienced at all. She's still very prudishly Karhinen.
Well, we'll
That,
get to that when with the
yeah.
first test too. You know, but here we see another thing I've dealt with in business. If you're ever in business where you have clients and you have to haggle deals and stuff with them, make sure in the bold print it is do not discuss your deal with other clients, because once somebody finds out somebody's got a deal, everybody wants that deal. And
Hmm.
when she gives the silver to that one that needs to take their kid
Hmm.
to the wisdom, everybody all of a sudden wanted that deal. So they
Hmm.
were faking everything and going in.
Hmm.
That is something, if you have a face-to-face business, you will 100% encounter. And that was a very real moment for me, because I was like, oh God, I feel like I'm running the gym again. And in fact, it actually happened the other day, because I mean, some people have grandfathered deals with me
Hmm.
that, they're
Because they've
paying
been
the
you
price
that
they
long.
paid 10
Yeah.
years ago because they've been with me that long. And if someone new comes in, they're paying probably 25% more per hour than the other people are. So you got to make sure you don't cross the streams, but the streams got crossed. And I was like, and so now this one person's like, well, I'm not getting as good a deal. I'm like, yeah, you got to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So something that I had forgotten about comes on. You said your next note was like page 100 something.
Yeah.
Page 94, 95. I had forgotten this part of the story that when who is it who comes to Moiraine, Marine, whatever. I should
Is
probably
it
look
the
up how you pronounce.
Mistress of Novices or
Yes, to tell
okay.
her that
Marine?
King Layman and all his brothers have been killed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I like Moraine's, she gives a I like being inside her head here because all right, look, I'm gonna say a prayer for their souls because that's the polite thing to do, but they weren't good people.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like how quickly she catches on. Oh crap, you want to put me on the throne. Um, so I like how quickly she sees that, and you see her thought process, so you know how and why she's able to play the game so well. But also she immediately rejects it in her mind, not because I'm going to be tied down and you're not supposed to talk about it. It's not polite to talk about it, but she knows that she could live for 200 or 300 years.
Mm-hmm.
And do I want to be tied to this throne for 200 or 300 years? Um, it's not just that she sees visions of mobs rampaging through the streets. That there is no way, and she goes more into more detail later, but her first thought is my my home country has suffered enough, and you want to do something that will almost certainly lead to riots, if not outright civil war. I am not going to be a part of this. Um, but of course, on the Aes Sedai side, they don't care. They've got a plan. This is the way things should be done. But I like that you know, you see her human side because she can't show that when we see her in the eye of the world. And when we see her elsewhere, it takes a while before you start to see Moraine's human side um in the series because what she's doing um is so darned important, but also, no spoilers, we'll talk about when we get to the end. The climax of the book is pretty harsh, and she has a real hard, wake up call to this is what the world is like.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what you're going to be facing going forward on this mission of yours.
There was a moment in here we meet Jarna, and I'm trying to remember where that was. I think it was when they got back, but it was another one of those. And this one's not a spoiler because we already know she is in the books we've been through, where she says something and Moiraine has the thought, well, it must be true again, but she's a black sister, so. Uh, but she's of the original ones with Leandrin's crew, so we know she is.
Was it was it Chesmal Imri? I know we see her at some point or hear about her at some point, and we know that she's one of the crew with
Yeah, the
Leandrin.
one I'm thinking of is Jarna. I can't remember where Chesmal came in here as well.
Tarna, you mean Tarna? Tarna Fair?
No, Jarna. Maybe I just misheard it on my when I was listening to it.
Sharna Malari. Who are you?
Yeah, that's the one looking in my.
Yeah, a gray who was part of
Mhm.
Leandrin's. 13. So,
But I just
yeah,
remember she was talking to her about something in the tower, and she had that thought again. Well, it must be true because she said it, and I was like, "Ooh, okay." I think it was
she's in New Spring chapter 6.
chapter 6, which is
Surprises.
the one after. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's back in the tower after they come back. Yeah, here we go. Jarna, 110. Oh, she was talking to her about the Sun Throne. She was
Mhm.
one of the ones talking to her about the Sun Throne.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's weird here. She talks about Terengale not being eligible because of his marriage to the Queen of Andor,
Hmm.
but we don't get any of that when Elaine is talking about being queen of both
Because it's a
Andor.
Karhin, it's a, oh, that's a good point. There's a Karhinan law that maybe it was because he wasn't the king of Andor, he was the prince consort.
Either way, it's a tie that combines both countries.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder if he had in his head how that worked.
Yeah, I wonder if it was more just it's the end of the world, so we'll have a takeover here kind of thing. But it never really addresses that. So it might have been just a hiccup. I mean, this is this is one paragraph out of
Mhm.
15 books, technically counting New Spring. So,
Well, we do get this nugget here. That was another thing I'd forgotten, which that Terengale is Moraine's half brother. Um, which I mean, it's obviously it's not a blood connection, but that actually does make a relationship connection between Rand and Moiraine
mhm.
because
No, Scott explained that it's Gallad and Moiraine have a connection, but Rand's tie was the mother to
yes,
Gallad.
yeah, that's why I
So,
say it's not a blood connection, but there is a relationship connection there,
yeah, step
which
cousins, step third removed cousin aunts.
yeah,
Either way, if she had decided to bed him, it wouldn't have been incest. We're good.
and that's what Rand cared about a couple of times.
Yeah, who is your daddy and what does he do? Yeah, I had
Yeah,
that
yeah.
problem because I had a sister older than me that I didn't know about, or that I didn't know who she was, and so I typically dated women a couple years older than me. So I was like, who is your daddy and what does he do?
All right, so on to your next note. Did you just unplug yourself? What did you do?
Am I back? Hello.
There you are.
Okay.
There you are.
Yeah, it's this cord. It's just like you barely bump it, and sometimes it just I don't know, have to replace the cord. I hope it's the cord and not the actual port that it goes into.
That would suck.
Yeah, because then I'd have to replace the whole thing. Uh,
All right, two more chapters left here.
yeah. So what happens in the itch? Oh, I did like that they added some context to why Elaida hates them
Hmm.
because speaking of the itch, they pulled a prank apparently and put itching powder in her accepted dress in her last year as an accepted. But I mean, the way Elaida treats them, maybe we should go into that because I think it's important because it's more than just a vendetta.
The vendetta comes later. What's curious to me is that she is this where you I can't remember where it comes in here, but um when yeah, because this is the still the training for the test that as Moraine is thinking and as she's talking to Marion that Elaida was genuinely trying to help them. She was a witch about it, but
Mm-hmm.
she was generally trying to help them. And to me, that was interesting and odd. The only thing I can think is that she took such an interest in Moiraine and Siuan, thinking that, well, they're pillow friends, therefore they must be man haters. and they are two of the strongest women to come to the tower in centuries. So this would be a coup for the Reds if they joined the Red.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't
So
think of it that way, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But this is again one that I had a personal connection to some degree if I'm taking it the right way.
mhm,
You said these two people that are some of the most powerful to come in. She saw something in them. They're obviously
mhm,
gifted, uh, and she is technically in charge of them. She is their supervisor. Well, I had that situation with the coach when I was at Velocity and then Excel, where a young coach had come in, and I saw a lot of potential in this young kid. He used to play running back at Texas Southern. You know, he was a good young kid and very raw in his knowledge, but he seemed like he could pick things up and do a good job. And so I pushed him. I pushed him really hard, gave him more shifts. I made him do independent study kind of stuff, train with me, you know, to go over technique as
mhm,
while we're working out and stuff. And you know, I was really hard on him. Nothing like Elaida here, but I was harder on him than I was on the other coaches. But it was because I saw the expectations were higher for him, and he took it the wrong way. And he took it as me pushing at him and poking him and basically discriminating against him because he was black. And so he ended up quitting and leaving. And I saw him again 10 years later after he had joined the army and gone through all of that. And he just, hey, I'm in Houston. You want to hang out? Okay. And he just laid out, I finally got it. You were trying to groom me to be an awesome coach. And I totally missed it. And I feel bad. And so sometimes these things work out, you know,
mhm.
but he had taken it the wrong way. He took it as the racial thing, and he had gotten burned by that end of the crowd, and then he started discovering himself, and he's actually one of the reasons this podcast exists. He's the one that first gave me the Shelby Steele book. So it was but that was what I was doing, and I immediately, that's where my thoughts went when Elaida was
Mhm.
doing this, because she made the comment of, you will not fail this test, or something, you know, you will not disappoint me, kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But and we get glimpses of this a little more later when we start to get some points of view from we've met Pavara, right? Because I think we see her
Yes.
in
We
Crown of
met her right
Swords.
before we start. It's the end of
Yeah,
Crown of Swords, near
in the
the
Crown of Swords. So when we meet her, we start to see a little bit more how the Reds are when we get some White Tower scenes later, and they seem very rigid, and very harsh. And you would think that that would be the Greens because they're the warrior Aja, and so you would think they're the ones that are going to be all martial and they're going to act like drill instructors, and but they have um they the Greens have kind of a an almost childlike view of warrior society. Theirs is more of a uh Arthurian legend Camelot kind of ideal. Uh, whereas the Reds are really vicious. They go in kind of the other direction of, you know, no, this we must be harsh. We must have kind of cruel punishments. We must push ourselves. Um, and there's I don't know how far down this rabbit hole we want to go, but there seems to definitely be um a psychological and personality type that goes to the red. And thus, there's probably not an accident we've that we start to find out how many reds are actually black. And when we meet Pavara, we get that kind of from learning about her, that she is an oddball amongst the red. Um, but that's because she didn't she didn't join because she hated men particularly. She joined because men who can channel need to be stopped because she had a personal tragedy from a man who could channel. And so
Mhm.
she's doing it to protect, not to punish. That makes her an oddball. So to a lot to from Elaida's point of view, this is the way things are done. This is the way things have always been done. And she was, I mean, you get from Moiraine and Siuan's perspective, this is why they played pranks on her when she wasn't accepted, because she was always like this. So it was kind of there's probably no doubt she was joining the Reds, and this is how they tend to be. So from her perspective, this is how it's done. This is how you push someone. This is how you make sure that they are molded properly. And the animosity comes because I think one, Moiraine sees in her eye after the fact that when they're passing in the hall that she's pissed because she was punished for helping them.
Mm-hmm.
So that she's already pissed there. But then you have to think that both of them, after all the work Elaida put in to make sure they didn't fail, and they both choose blue, that had to really rub salt in the wound.
Well, and that actually touches on my next point on page 122. She's talking about how she's trying to, like you said, back to school as usual. Her and Siuan are trying to learn, but I said I don't want to teach them because they're being forced to teach novices because the accepted are out of the tower, and then they're looking at Siuan and Moiraine, and instead of me teaching you, you should be teaching novices, and da da da. And she makes the comment, in some ways, I said I could be as petty as anyone else, though that was something no accepted would dare to say aloud. Moiraine hoped that small enmities would fade soon. Paltry irritations sometimes had a way of festering into lifelong antagonisms. And then again, welcome to the world of women. I have heard female coaches say, I wish I could coach the men's team because at the beginning of the season, if two men fight, they make up and the rest of the season goes on. If at the beginning of a season, two women fight, that grudge will hold till they're no longer on the same team together.
Yeah. And not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but when they do get raised to the blue and Jordan starts to through this blue I think she's a sitter, Edith, that starts to lay out directly, speak way more directly than they usually do about the politics of things, because these new sisters need to know the lay of the land so they don't set a foot wrong, and just starts to lay out very directly. This is, these are the rivalries and the animosities among the Ajahs, and we've already seen a little bit of it, but so you know that the Blues and the Reds don't like each other, but as from Maureen's point of view, as she's thinking, no one even knows why anymore. They have been diametrically opposed for so long. No one even knows why. No one even knows what started the rift.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Men or women are great at conflict avoidance. They suck at conflict resolution.
Mm.
And it's the other way around. We tend to fight over stupid little things, but then we're kind of cool later. So it's just, I know we're not allowed to talk about it on YouTube, but differences between men and women. In fact, this is why this whole book is problematic. Moiraine in her head talks over and over and over about the differences between men and women. In fact, I think when she's talking about the power, she says, is she talking to Siuan about what would we do if we found the kid? We couldn't teach him the power.
Yes.
And she's like, yes, it's as different between men and women as their bodies are, is what she said. And I was like, ooh, cancelable. But
canceled.
One thing we can't skip over is the cameos. We get Elias on page 115.
Yes. Yes.
So it's just like any other prequel. You get the cameos of the characters everybody likes. It's like it's like the Boba Fett showing up.
So did you have any more thoughts before we wrap it up?
We got to go to the test because that was my next thoughts.
Okay. Do you want to go through the test or do you want to stop there?
Let's go through the test.
Okay. That's all of chapter 9.
We haven't even been
right?
at it in an hour yet. So yeah, that's
chapter
basically
9
the
and
whole
10.
chapter 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chapter 9 and then in a little bit of 10.
When you talked about this is where I wanted to bring up again Moiraine's sexual naivety. She is embarrassed to be naked in front of the Aes Sedai, let alone her first test in front of all these men. And it definitely was one of those things that you knew was going to be one of the tests just with the lead up, because men seeing her naked apparently is something that's going to throw her off to the point of being able to not make a weave.
And we talked about that a little bit in the lead up to Doom as well. In Karheen, when they're, I forget the name of the festival, but they're having like a winter festival and they just go nuts. But they're all masked
Mm-hmm.
because
Was
that
it
way, even if someone knows who you are, they don't really know who you are.
was it your dad that said if you ever got naked, cover your face so nobody knows who you are?
Yes. I think you got that from good old Uncle Elmer.
Rules to live by.
Rules to live by indeed. But yes, because there there are there are proprieties and there are the way things are done, and this just isn't the way things are done. You don't get undressed in front of people. That's not right. Um, and then we'll see a little bit later when they go out to get dresses made. Well, yeah, she's not awkward there because that's what you do. That's a time you would get naked because you have to have precise measurements, and this is what seamstresses do. And it's like getting naked in front of a doctor versus getting naked in front of your neighbor. It's like, hey
But
neighbor.
but it's cool in episode 1 to take a bath with your warder.
I don't think I mentioned because we were ranting about so much stuff, but um, because I was just thinking, talking about the animosity between the Reds and the Blues, you would think it would be the Reds and the Greens because of their views on men. Um, again, much like as other people have talked about ad nauseum, Drinker and Az and some other people I listen to, that one of the reasons you have, besides the fact that it's just how the world works, the reason you have distinct looks with different cultures, like they did with Game of Thrones, so that you could tell, okay, those are northern people. Okay, those are the southern people. Those are the people from across the ocean. So you know where you are. You know who's who. You can place the geography in your mind. Same thing with the Ajaz. That's something a green would do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something a blue would do, especially not Moiraine.
Well, but it explains the animosity between the maybe not yet in the books, but it's not too much of a spoiler, but it explains the animosity between the greens and or excuse me, the blues and the reds
Mhm.
because the red that was the Amyrlin seat that was so horrible she got deposed really quickly and the blues took over right away and that's when you started having the string of blues
Yeah.
as and that's what started the animosity. It wasn't their ideologies.
Well, it seems like it goes back even farther than that, though. From what Moraine is thinking here in a couple of chapters when they go through it. But anyway, back to the testing. Um, I
Oh,
like the way
another cameo we got was Steppen, who is the best actor in the show. The one that makes Lan cry so hard because he died.
my nipples.
But the person who
Um,
played that warder, I mean, he did the most bang up job in the show, other than maybe Leandrin.
Leander was I it was frustrating the way he was portrayed because I liked the actor who played Lan. I thought he did a pretty good
No,
job
no,
of
he's
playing
good. He
Lan.
he he is a fixable part of this series.
Hmm. That's why it was so frustrating when the chest pounding. Anyway, um, did you have any thoughts on the test itself? Because one of the things, I mean, this
Yes,
is
yes, I
this
did.
is why Elaida got in trouble is, and that to me that was revealing and interesting because Moiraine is kind of shocked. It's no, she didn't get in trouble for how harsh she was to you. That was fine. No, she got in trouble for cheating. She wasn't supposed to help you
Yeah,
this
and
much.
the way they described it is she was giving the pattern of what the tests are going to be as they go.
And because a major component of the test is the unexpected. All you know, all you're supposed to know is that you have to memorize these 100 weaves, weave them precisely, and you're going to be distracted. You don't know how harsh the distractions are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what the distractions are because that's the point. Because this is one of the places where the Aes Sedai get it right is known knowns and unknown unknowns and unknown knowns. And the world is chaotic and dangerous, and we've got a very dangerous job. We need to make sure that if you're going to break, it's not out there.
Mm-hmm. Which someone the thing about it is that the only kind of plot hole to me with this is we'll take Elaida as a great example, but there's plenty of Aes Sedai in there that we could point to if their flaws are described. Someone with as many internal flaws as Elaida, I can't see making it through this test.
Yeah, but she's also really driven.
But she's so blind outside that drive. And this
True.
test comes at you from every angle to actually take advantage of blind spots. It's supposed to weed
Yeah.
out blind spots.
Yeah. That's true. And even though they think what Elaida does at the end is a little is over the line. That was a little too harsh, too psychologically damaging. You didn't need to do that to test her in having her dead father show up at the end of the test there.
I haven't got to the end of the test. I just did chapter 9.
Okay, that's the very beginning of chapter 10 that it doesn't explain exactly how they're doing it, but the Aes Sedai around the Tarangreal are manipulating it to make the distractions come at you.
Hmm.
And so there is an element of personality there. And there's an element of knowing who and I think that's where Elaida was cheating because one, if she was going to be involved in the test, but two, that knowing they make the test personal. And that's why they talk about how, you don't talk about it. It's shared in silence,
Mm-hmm.
because it becomes very personal. To push you, to push to I mean, and you've had you've had these girls, now women, for decades sometimes. So you know them. You know their strengths and weaknesses, and you want to push on those.
Well, okay, so that makes sense with the first test because whoever had the first draw just watched her trying to be serene as she undressed herself.
Yep. So let me do something here that I know is going to unsettle you.
Okay,
So, and
so that changes my thought on what I had on that because I had forgotten that part and I hadn't gotten that far. But to me, it just the way he described it, because we were talking about the one that the accepted test is like a Turing Grail that takes you into the dream world.
mhm,
There's got to be some aspect to this,
yes.
except now they're working as dreamers to manipulate the dream.
Hmm.
But the thought I had was the transfer from one to the other. In the other Turing Grail, you had memory. In the accepted test, you had memory. In this one, she completely forgot. Like you're going from one dream to another in real life. It just fades
Yes.
away really quick. And I was like, well, we get the description from Egwene of actually going into real dreams, and that's what it made me think of when she goes into a real
Mm,
dream. But the wise ones also talk about how you can manipulate dreams from the outside. So I think this tiring. Well, actually, my thought is still relevant because
mm.
this is like a thing that does the thing they forgot how to do, but the wise ones know how to do.
This may be some kind of dreamer training device.
Yeah, something like along those lines, or
May
a
have been
hack
what it was
around the
originally
system.
intended
Like
for. Yeah.
not everybody can dream, but I made a Turing Grail so everybody can do the thing I do.
Yes, like
And
like the Terran Grails that they use to meet in the dream world. Uh,
mhm. So this is
yeah.
basically looking into the dream and then manipulating it from the outside. You're in that black void looking into the light and then playing with it. And the
That
Forsaken do it all the time. The
that
Forsaken make
yeah.
people's dreams horrible so they don't pull them into the dream world unless they're going to actually kill them in the dream world, but they don't pull them in there. They make their dreams do what they want them to do. And so
Mhm.
this Turing Grill seems to do that.
That makes a lot of sense because as you pointed out, there is a very distinct difference between the accepted test where, I mean, we see from 90's perspective, she was fully cognizant of what was going on and what she was supposed to do.
And that actually takes care of the hole I had in my thought about it being like the dream world, but in the real dreams, because who figured out the weaves and how did somebody go through all 100 without dying to figure it out the first time? They're watching you weave.
Hmm.
And so as soon as you create the weave, they can go ahead and let the dream go.
Yeah. And that idea about it being an actual dream, not like somehow you're stepping into your own dreams. You're kind
Mhm.
of creating the world through.
Well, there has to be
on
a
a subconscious
metaphysics
level.
that's consistent with the world for
Hmm.
this thing to work.
Hmm.
And the world of dreams itself doesn't work in this situation because then you can manipulate it as much as it can manipulate you.
And going when your mind transitions from dream to dream, or when you kind of wake up but not really and then fall back, that confusion
Mm-hmm.
fits perfectly with what he's describing when she goes in and then when she
Yeah, and
transitions from
that's what
scene to
got me on
scene.
that train of thought. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So
That
it's
makes a lot of sense. And this reread, because of the stuff you've been pointing out as we go, I've been noticing and thinking more and more about the dream world and how it connects to things, even when it's not, um, even when it's not direct.
even Egwene makes comment of it when she's able to look in on Gawain's dreams. Not the times she gets sucked in, but the times
Mhm.
she's able to just look in. She makes the comment to something to the extent of, "I know you can manipulate them, but I just watched because I didn't want to change his thoughts for him," kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm. Interessante. All right. Well, that's all I got. You got any more?
Nope. I
We should,
guess do we call it that we went through chapter 10 and I'll just catch up, or
no, let's go through chapter 10 starting next time. Because there is a fair bit more after the test finishes, and it's just like the first page and a half that is that final 100th weave. Um, so there's only a couple of comments. Um, oh, I'd forgotten about that.
I
All
don't have
right.
it up, so go ahead and read the comment out for me.
All right. So not actually a prequel. It was written after the series had begun. True. New Spring is actually an expanded version of an earlier short story Jordan published in a sci-fi anthology. I forgot that that's where New Spring originated as a short story that he then expanded and put out as a short novel.
Ah,
Short for him. I'd forgotten about that. Um, Now this is, I think, where maybe you and Scott are talking past each other a little bit. That okay, so at the time of the Dragon Prophecy, the Aes Sedai couldn't immediately travel to Dragonmount. The Isle were still in retreat. There would have been bands of them still scattered about. Um,
which is what the Steeler was worried
yeah,
about. Yeah.
yeah. So that is yes, but it's not just that.
Well, and we take into give Scott the credit here that I was completely wrong that they didn't even go look because I just got
Well,
corrected reading the next chapter. So,
but Tamra is very circumspect about her searchers and about the way she's looking. So you would think to kind of to your point that you were making there last time and again this time is you would think if it's this darned important that um you would the after that foretelling the Amyrlin would have immediately summoned sisters and warders and said you've got to go to Dragon Mount and start searching
mm-hmm.
right now, no matter the danger. But one, there was a danger. There was a 3 day long battle. That's how long the Bloodstone lasted. It was a 3 day battle. Had just finished, and the armies had just kind of separated. Um, and so there was that danger. One, and they don't know how the Aiel are going to react to Aes Sedai. They haven't interacted yet before, like they will later. Um, But then also, as Moiraine and Siuan are talking about, she can't do the logical thing here because I would think she knows how important this is because she goes to such great lengths to find him, but she can't do it openly. As Moiraine and Siuan are talking about, is how are the
Well,
other
because
sisters going to
and
react?
that's partly because of the politics between the Reds and the Blues.
Hmm.
Because if there wasn't that rift already there, it would have been six Ajas against Red of what we do with this boy when we get him. But because there's already that rift and political strings are being
There's
pulled in all directions,
factionalism and all this stuff,
yeah.
yeah, and that's setting aside even thinking Tamra had been Amyrlin long enough and was savvy enough from what we see of her she may have had strong suspicions that whatever Aes Sedai say publicly that the Black Ajah is real. Even if she didn't, then she would need to be circumspect because of the factions and the politics.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to your point, she kind of has to shoot herself in the foot. This is the best she can do because of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm always cool with being wrong as long as I'm actually wrong. So there you go, Scott. You
Yeah.
got me.
Well, that's all I got, and I gotta get back to work. Did you have any other closing thoughts here?
I did, but I forgot what they were while we were going over that last part. So,
Well,
what are we going to talk about in our next social episode? We've got
I have no idea.
a lot of mini topics thrown out that we could do, but uh, we'll just text back and forth, I guess. But yeah, keep commenting away. And if anybody other than Scott is listening to this, you can comment as well. It's cool.
Yes, it's allowed.
Join the conversation. I remember, like you said, when you first came across the books, was me and the guys in the nerdery talking about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way it always was with the Wheel of Time, because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
And that we've all got our little theories, even though the books are completely written. There are still theories in the air. So, so yeah, just comment in, let us know your thoughts. If you have a completely different perspective than us, like I'm doing the, physiological, the psychological perspective. You've got your perspective. Scott's got his perspective, and everybody's got their own. That's the great thing about fiction. So, comment away, and we'll riff with it, man.
All right. Well, we will see y'all next time.
See you next time.